Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to Page Chewing with the wonderful Steve Talks Books on his channel. Earlier today, we were on Taylor, Read Between the Pages channel with Tom Debrell and Daniel Jackson. That was awesome. And now we have another awesome Page Chewing episode. Because we can't get enough of Page Chewing, we just cram it all in one weekend. Now we have another incredible creative joining Steve and I, and that is the wonderful Branwen OShea. So, welcome, Branwen.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Oh,
Uh-oh.
apologies. That is my fire alarm. Just give me
Uh-oh.
1 second.
Hope the room isn't on fire.
Are you okay?
Hopefully there's not a fire in PL's place.
Well, that's a way to start an interview.
Yeah, it's setting the bar pretty high there, PL. I don't know how. He's not running out with his hair on fire, so I'm assuming it's okay. But Brandon, if you want to give us a quick introduction on kind of work you do.
Sure. So I write science fiction and fantasy, mostly for teens, and that's kind of my writing piece. I also work as a therapist and work a lot with animals, rescues, and stuff like that. So do a lot of
For
things.
writing YA, how do you determine what's the line for YA if subject matter that wouldn't quite fit in that genre? Do you have someone else who reads and kind of helps you out with what may or may not be appropriate, or how do you know where that line is?
Well, I work mostly with teens, so I feel like I have a pretty good sense of that. My kids are teens, so that helps.
Hmm.
They beta read everything the first time,
Okay.
so they also give me feedback, and and then I have a couple other teens that read as well for me. So
Hmm.
yeah,
When did you start writing?
I've always written, but this novel writing has been since I think like 2011.
Hmm.
Um, when I never set out to write a novel. I was at that time there was the Hunger Games, and there was a lot of post-apocalyptic stuff out, and the teens that I worked with just kept saying over and over again they couldn't imagine any sort of positive future for humanity, or that
Hmm.
we'd ever get our act together. And and then that weekend, I went to a movie. I can't even remember the movie, but I just remember the previews were all doom and gloom, like the end of the world sort of thing, over and over and over. And I started thinking, wow, this is really like, it's really out there. That's really the only thing that's being put out in mass media.
Hmm.
Not like a lot of the indie stuff, but a lot of the mass media stuff was really, apocalyptic and stuff. And so I was wondering if there was a way to do something that would um, kind of blend in with that, but also give a more positive view. And I had no intention of doing a book. I was just kind of thinking about it. And that night I went to bed and I had 6 dreams in a row. And each dream, like I would wake up, I'd be like, wow, that was really interesting. I'd go to sleep, it would start right where it ended. And it was literally like the whole series. Um,
Hmm.
and the next morning I just started writing. So that was kind of how I started writing novels.
Wow.
Unusual, but yeah.
So, did you write it down? Did you write or some ideas down that morning after all these dreams? Did you kind of?
I s- yeah, I started to. It was it's hard to explain. It was like so much information that I
Hmm.
couldn't. I mean, it's a whole series. I couldn't just write it down immediately. So I just started writing down like the pieces that I remembered, about the setting, and there's a lot to the world building. I knew it was in a future ice age, and the different species involved. And as I got to each part of the story, the dream was narrated by one of the characters, Rana, who's a star being. And he's back.
Yeah, he's back. Yeah, he's no fire. Hopefully, or are you muted?
I can't hear you.
Oh, sorry.
There
It's
we
a
go.
brand new building. I don't know if some fire alarm issue. So I really apologize. Sorry about that.
That's
Oh, we
okay. I'm
just want to
glad
be
you're
sure you're
okay.
okay. Yeah.
Yeah, no, we're all good. It's just, nothing's on fire. Trust me.
Good.
Okay. Good.
So it was narrated by Rana, so I kind of knew who she was. But as I started writing the different aspects of the story that she told me about, like not actually writing it, but just kind of taking notes on what I remembered from the dream, um, each of the characters kind of would like step forward in my mind and tell me their little story, and then I would start, and I would, kind of write the basic, and then they would kind of give me like what their. It was almost like they were adults and they were going back through their life and telling me their story. And so each book, they kind of just give me that segment in more detail as I do it. So it's very much like pantsing a novel. Even though in the dream I saw the whole series, so I know the overall arc, I don't really remember a whole lot of it until they like it's almost like it's a movie in my head and I kind of write it out. So it's hard to explain.
Wow, that's pretty incredible that you had a dream that was, because usually when you stop a dream and you restart it, it's never quite the same. It's called
Right.
it's a weird version. So the fact that you were able to put it all together and it's the whole series, it's pretty awesome.
It is, and the weird part is I think there were 6 dreams, and I think it's gonna actually be 6 novels. So, it's really bizarre. I don't know if that's the way it was divided, I don't remember, I was, like, half asleep, but but I do know there were 6. So, yeah, it's interesting. So
Oh wow!
That's
So
awesome.
when you wrote the first book, how did you what did you decide, or what route did you take to get published? Did you automatically know what route you were going to take?
I didn't know anything about writing. I didn't realize I was writing multiple point of view. I didn't know that was not done at the time. I
Hmm.
just I just kind of wrote it and just went with it. And then when I was done with the rough draft, and I realized, obviously it needed editing and everything. But I started looking at getting a mentor to help me, and that's how I got involved on Twitter. I started trying to get into some of the mentoring programs. The problem was my book was so long that a lot of people, were like, we can't do this. It's a really interesting idea, but we can't do it justice in a month.
Hmm.
So a couple people helped me, like unofficially mentored me with some stuff. And I was lucky enough to get into some good writing groups. But as far as the publishing route, I tried the querying trenches, and that was a nightmare. Um, I found out after about a year of querying that anything over 100,000 words is pretty much usually rejected if it's your debut.
Oh wow!
Um, and mine at the time was 125,000. So I don't know how many people actually read it, read much past the first paragraph where you kind of give your little, genre and word count and stuff. So I mean, a few people said they didn't want dystopian, which
Hmm.
it is post-apocalyptic, but it's very much hope punk, not what I would consider dystopian. In that, I mean, it kind of feels like dystopian when it starts, but it kind of shifts as the series moves through. Um, so yeah, so I tried that for a long time, and then I started sending it to small publishers. I ended up getting a contract for a company that I'm not going to name. They were great. They gave some great feedback for the edits and everything. But when I went to do the actual contract, the edits to the contract were not being put in writing.
Hmm.
And I thought, I just don't want to start a series off on this unstable footing because, I just need to know that this series, which is so important to my heart, that it really can be fully developed. And I didn't want them just cutting it off, and being like, oh, we decided not to continue this or something like that. So at that point, I just said, I'm just going indie. I'm just going to do it myself. So then I started looking into that and learning about that process. So I kind of tried everything.
Well, I'm glad you did. It's amazing, amazing book. I read the first one. I have not read the second one yet, but of course I will. This was, and not that it should have surprised because I always sensed that you were a great author, which you are
Oh,
obviously. But just it's one of those books where it's like, wow, this is really good. And I got a lot of, I got some Hunger Games vibes. I got some, a little bit of almost the Stand vibes that you just a mashup. I mean, I know comparing authors to authors is really not great. It's not and certainly not an exact science. But if I talk about some of the books that I enjoyed that I got those kind of vibes from prior to reading this book, I say that was it. And you because it's very much a page turner. Your book is very like that unput down. I didn't feel like it was, and I read some chonkers, believe me. I didn't feel that it was as long as it was. And I mean, 500 pages is, to me, it's kind of average for sci-fi fantasy these days. Like, I don't.
I read long books, but I think it was 148,000 words or something like that. So it's definitely in the long category. So yeah. But, yeah.
Mine's 100. My first book was 160, and my second one was like 200.
Yeah, I mean that's what I like to read, but so it makes sense, I guess, that I wrote it. But yeah.
But it was fantastic. I apologize. I missed, I'm sure, some of the conversation because I was dealing with a silly fire thing. I was just, Steve probably covered it already, but I was just wondering, what was the inspiration behind the calling in the series? Did you already cover this?
Yeah.
Disregard that question. I am just curious. I can always ask you off camera.
It was a set of dreams. Just.
Oh, so that's when I came in. You were talking about dreams with Steve. Okay, so that's a set of dreams, eh?
Yeah.
Like not nightmares, but just like
dreams. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yep.
That's amazing. And like in like Technicolor kind of like.
Totally. It was like watching a movie, except Rana was telling me what was happening, and I would ask questions, and she would answer them, and yeah.
Wow. I wish that would happen to me. But it's easier to write my books. I wish that would happen to me. Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And you mentioned the querying trenches. That must be so soul crushing to submit to queries so long and to have so many rejections, because everyone has rejections. Sounds like, so that must be really tough to do. It must be to keep going and to be motivated. It's it must be tough.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Well, it does. So like, and I mean, is it something that you think you'd do again in the future, though, Branwen? Even though it wasn't, maybe it didn't work out that time, but as you continue your writing journey, like.
I don't know. I have several books that I haven't brought out yet that are done. One of them, a couple have been through editors. They're pretty close to being ready to either self-publish or definitely query, but I really enjoy doing it myself, and I enjoy the freedom, and I feel like some of the stuff that I like to do in my books is a little bit different. I like to go a little bit into the spiritual and paranormal and kind of combine genres in ways that I'm not sure publishers are always supportive of, and so I'm not sure if it's something I want to pursue in the future. Yeah, I kind of go back and forth with that, so not sure.
And Austin had a comment. Dreams are more realistic feeling than reality at times. I have bad eyesight in real life, but in my dreams I can see really well.
That's great.
Yeah. So I'm also curious. Did you feel that, because you talk about combining genres, kind of, in your book, did you feel that, like, even for yourself, like, how would you classify your own work? Like, did you feel that? Do you feel that it's harder to market, because it's a great book, but do you feel that it's harder to market even in the indie sphere? I know that we have a lot more latitude to kind of write, blur genres, but do you feel it's hard to market that way, or?
I feel like, I mean, I joke when people ask me what genre is, and I just give like this huge long thread. I mean, it's post-apocalyptic sci-fi. It's got some fantasy elements. It's got some paranormal elements. It's definitely fits within hope punk. It fits within visionary fiction. It fits within, some people have said it's definitely, to them, dystopian, though I think that's kind of just the first book. The way things start with Northern Haven being underground, and that part of it I feel is very dystopian, but I'm not sure the series overall is. because most of the series takes place on the surface of the Earth, out on the Ice Age. So, yeah, I always just kind of, it depends on my mood, which genre I kind of am tweeting about that day. As far as marketing it, I generally try to stick to young adult speculative. There are I mean, it does get pretty dark and later in the series, and some people have said it's almost borderline dark paranormal, or not horror, because I can't write that, but it is scary, definitely at parts. So yeah, people, beta readers, have compared book 3 to the Alien movie. So there's some aspects that are kind of like that. So it I don't know. Yeah, I
I
don't know
think
how to
Steve's
answer that.
I think Steve's all over that. If you're talking, comparing it to Alien, so Steve's a big horror
Yeah,
guy. So and his influence is slowly pushing me towards more horror. Is just hanging out with him as time goes on. But this series, The Calling, how many books are planned in the series?
uh, I think I'm a little like you, PL, with this. I have 6 planned for the main series, but I know you have a lot of other stuff planned with yours. I have a whole bunch of what I call liminal tales that are like, my main books in the series are like book 1.0, book 2.0. I have these liminal tales, one of which is published, The Chords That Bind, and that falls between The Calling and The Chasm. It's book 1.1. They have decimal places so people know where to find them, and they give information about the series, but they're not required reading to understand the series. So there's a whole bunch of those planned. I have a book of myths planned for the star beings and also for the other species that come in. I have a prequel about Commander Savas's younger years. I have a whole prequel trilogy planned about how the Ice Age started, and how Shast, the organization that developed all the underground havens, how that all got played out. And then I have some other ideas that are more nebulous about, after the series, really going out onto other planets, since the star beings can starbeam all over the place, that it could really expand exponentially if I want to. So yeah, I love this world. I'd be very happy writing in it forever. But I also have all these other series that I could also write. So my ideas are just, there's a lot.
Sign me up. I'm in
So
for the
yeah,
long haul.
yeah.
You keep
So
writing. I'm gonna keep reading them. So that's
yeah,
awesome. That is
yeah,
awesome. Yeah,
yeah.
I don't, and I don't feel alone anymore now that I
I
know a
knew
lot of
you'd
people think
appreciate that.
yeah. I know a lot of people think I'm crazy for, you got 20 books planned in this whole. I'm like, yeah. So
Yeah.
now I feel I have a kindred spirit. So that's great.
And how do you
Yes.
find the time to write with everything else that you have to going on in life? How do you balance your time?
Well, I guess for me, a lot of the writing happens in my head, where I think, like, the world building, it's not really plotting it out. It's more like what I call musing about it. Like, what is this world? What's this continent like? What mammals live there at this time? And, what would this society do in this situation? um, and that part I do, when I'm making dinner or cooking or cleaning or driving my kids somewhere. So I feel like I live a lot in this world, mentally. Um, and then when I do have time to write, it just kind of like gushes out and comes out pretty quickly. So I don't spend a lot of time, I see people on Twitter talking about how, they eked out 250 words, and I can't imagine, like, that must be awful. I feel so bad for them when they say that, because for me it just kind of is so wanting to come out that it just kind of usually pops right out. And it's like thoroughly enjoyable, and it's like I'm happy doing that for my fun thing for the day or whatever. Like it's not work, even though it is. It's not really, So yeah.
What has surprised you most through your writing experiences?
I think how different writing different books can be. This series was the first one I wrote, and I think the first book took me 10 years to get the whole thing drafted and feel like it's relatively decent to put out. And like I said, the characters are very interactive and stuff. However, during those 10 years, I also wrote other books. And there was one that I wrote in 4 months that was a middle grade fantasy about magical cats that just came out so quickly, like I said, in a matter of months, which after spending years and years and years was very different. And those characters, I had to. It's based on some stories that I told about one of our cats who had a very unusual behavior, and I just used to make up stories about it for my kids when they were toddlers, and that's the basis of the book. But those characters were very much like I developed them in more of a traditional writing sense, so it was a very different experience to write and compose that book versus The Calling. And then I have a paranormal thriller that I wrote that, again, it was, I created the characters. It's based on some historical stuff and some past life stuff and all kinds of things that, again, it was more of, that one I actually plotted as an experiment. So that one is a very different process overall. But just how different each book can feel. And I find that every time I sit down to start a new one, it's a very different experience. I'm in a different spot, even if it's a series. You have different level of experience with each one. The characters are different. It's always kind of an adventure in a different way. So, yeah.
So with now you have your second book out.
Yep.
Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Fantastic.
I have it here.
You have it?
Here.
Can we see the big?
Yeah.
Oh, it's
See,
beautiful.
there it is. Oh, wait.
Yeah.
It's not showing very well.
Yeah.
Always the reverse
beautiful
stuff. But anyways, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
I cannot wait to get to that. And they are perfect for the shelves because, believe me, these covers are gorgeous. That's what really eye-catching.
Roy did an amazing job with those. Yeah.
These are beautiful. So, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say the back cover for the third one, they just blew me away with the way they did the back cover for the third one. Because they all have cool back covers. This is the back of the chasm with the mountains, and this one has the eagle in the mountains. But the third one has actually, like, if you look at the picture, it's almost like a story that you can see as you kind of scan across the scene. It's so cool. And it kind of sets the scene for, it's in the, I'm trying to think, is it in the back? Well, I'll tell you, it can be world premiere of what you see footsteps in the snow that shift from one creature to another. We'll just say that.
Oh, wow. That is awesome.
And then enter a cave and you just see the cave. So it's a very cool picture.
Wow, that's amazing. That's incredible. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, and that book is called The Ruined.
The Ruined, okay.
The Ruined, yeah.
Okay, that's awesome. No, what I was going to ask is that we were talking about this a bit earlier, and we have on a couple of different episodes of Page Chewing with Steve, Taylor, and I. That so I always say that for me, I found it incredibly tough to write my second book. My second book was just like, wow. It sounds like you don't really have, a flow problem with that. I think for me, it was more a pressure thing. I felt the pressure of expectations and to be that much better. And, now that you have a first book out, you want to give the audience, your readers, more of the good things they wanted. deal with any critiques, but you still want to write your own book. And I just felt a lot of, I don't feel that writing the third book at all. I feel a lot more confident in general, but I just think the second book was really like, I felt the pressure getting to me. Did you feel that with your second book at all, or?
Well, I felt like honestly my life was kind of falling apart as I wrote the second book. So that was my problem with the second book. But I actually had the draft for The Chasm done. The Chasm and The Ruined were actually one mammoth, like 1,000-page book that I had the whole draft for written before The Calling came out. So that made things a lot easier. So when I did The Chasm, I had to just kind of figure out where to split it and to make the arcs work. And for The Ruined, I definitely need to add more, but it wasn't hard to write it because I already had that basis down. I knew where I was going with it. So it wasn't hard that way. It was hard knowing that how much people had liked The Calling and hoping that it wasn't, because I knew it went in directions that my editors were surprised. So I was hoping that it wasn't, going to surprise readers in a negative way. So yeah.
So a quick comment here from Austin. I love doing that. It is very similar to daydreaming. I need to be more disciplined and write more of it, though. Interesting speculating the various different paths you can take.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, there's always these, for most of us, these other things going on in our lives that affect or can potentially affect our writing. And,
Yeah.
I or whether you're a booktuber, there's always these other things going on. And because, it can really affect your creativity, and, whether it's how much you post or what you post, how frequently, or, how much you write. But again, Brandon, you said you're fortunate enough to, for the most part, kudos to you for being able to soldier through through personal issues and get your book done. So, kudos and congrats on that. And, things are getting better. And beyond that, like, when you, like me, when you have this vision, I think, of where you're going and what you're doing, you're writing 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 books or 20 books. I really think it helps.
Yeah.
That for me, anyways. I don't know if you feel the same, Brandon. But like,
Definitely.
because yeah. This is the beginning of a long journey. I can't give up now. I have to.
Yeah. Yes, I joke sometimes with my friends that if I die, I'm going to come back and ghostwrite the rest of the series because it will get written one way or another. Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is that we talked about this a bit earlier too on the Page Chewing podcast earlier today with Taylor and Tom and Daniel, and Steve and I have talked about with other writers as well. Is that we talked about the whole I'm not sure how we're going to encapsulate a definition, but the George R. R. Martin, Patrick Rothfuss thing, where incomplete series, it's not a syndrome because we don't know what's going on in their lives. Like, the fact that there's some big writers out there who have these mammoth series that have been so popular and are unfinished, and we don't know if they're ever going to be finished because of things that go on in the writers' lives, etc. Right? And this morning we talked about that sense of accountability for our work. However, we reserve the right to do what we're going to do with our writing, whether that's wrap up a series in a duology, whereas originally planned it to be 4 books or 10 books, or make it a standalone, or decide, oh well, this was originally going to be a standalone, but now we turn into a series because we just felt it need to be. So, I think that sense of motivation, I think, to also not let down your audience is always going to weigh heavily as well. But ultimately, it's going to be up to the writer, right? And what's going on in the writer's mind and how they're feeling mentally, emotionally, physically, and whether they're, they feel that they can continue legitimately move forward with the series, right? So, and writing is, I know you're saying, Branwen, as well, that when it's flowing, and it's great, and I feel the same. When I'm on, man. But sometimes I'm not.
Yeah.
And when it is, I don't. You're mentioning word counts. I don't hold myself to word counts. I just, when I'm inspired, I write, and when I feel good, I write, and when I don't, I don't.
Yeah.
And I try. Part of what I do is I think I'm learning my limitations. I thought I could take on another project this year, and I found out I couldn't. And I felt really bad about that. But at the same time, I feel really good that I made the decision knowing that, yep, I'm about a one book a year person with my job commitments and everything else going in my life. And, like that's what I can do. And, I think it's important to be okay with whatever our limitations are as writers or creatives. You know what I mean? Like, we can only do this, right? But that's a big accomplishment because so many people never even finish their books or get that YouTube channel up that they were planning to do or put out, any content. So, I think as creatives, we have to be proud of what we do manage to accomplish rather than beating ourselves up too much about what we don't get done.
Yeah. I feel like I'm in the same boat as the readers in that I really want to see how it ends though. So I really, that's also my motivation is I want to know what happens next. I mean, I have general ideas, but there's a lot that there's a lot, like just the other day I one of my characters said something and I was just like, oh, wait a minute. This opens up a whole nother like category of yeah. So yeah, yeah, I feel like I would be disappointed if I didn't finish it. Not in myself, but in like I want to know what happens as much as I think the readers do. So that if that reassures any readers. So yeah.
And I wanted to ask you on your bio, it mentions that you used to have animals wait on your porch for you for help.
Yeah.
How did that? What's the story behind that?
Um I don't know exactly how it started. My older sister and I just always had special connections with animals. And at one point, we just realized that, they they literally were coming and hanging out on the porch waiting for us. There were strays that would just come up and wait until they didn't necessarily want us to feed them. They were like sometimes injured or they wanted something like that. The other day I was driving and a bobcat went in front of my car and then just kind of sat down. And I realized that its paw was injured and it was holding its paw up. And I was just kind of doing long distance energy work with it. And then it walked away. So, like, I've just kind of accepted that it's just kind of an unusual thing that happens in my life, that it's fun and I don't mind and I love animals. So it works out. But yeah, I don't really, it wasn't anything I started or declared or, just kind of has always been that way. I don't know. So
So a bobcat. Wow.
yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Yep.
What? Yeah.
Go ahead, Steve. Sorry.
No, I was just. What's the most unusual animal that has kind of come to you for help or unexpected?
I don't know. And the bobcat was cool. The I had two snakes waiting on the front step the other day, and they were garter snakes and nothing dangerous or anything. And they were they seemed like they wanted something, and I kind of just stood there for a while and tried to figure it out. And then I ended up sitting with them and they let me pet them. It was the weirdest thing. It was wild. And we just hung out for a while and then they just left. And yeah, I'm not really sure what exactly they wanted except to say hello or but um the bobcat was pretty cool
Yeah,
when that
that's pretty
happened.
cool.
It was
That's
pretty awesome. Yeah. There was I love ravens and crows, and there was a crow that I saw get injured by a car in front of me on the road that I ended up taking care of for like probably about a week, and that was pretty cool because I just think crows are magical. So that was pretty interesting to work with a crow for a while.
And
So,
speaking of cats, you also helped found a cat rescue.
well, unofficially, yeah. It was
Okay.
when my ex-husband and I first got married, we lived in an apartment in Connecticut, and there was a parking lot behind it where a lot of stray cats lived, and we ended up catching them and getting them, basically a trap and neuter sort of things, where we would get them fixed, get them their rabies shots, and then let them go, and we would put food out there and stuff. And it got to the point where I went into the vet one day with another cat, and I gave them my name, and they were like, "We don't have any charts for cats under that name." And I was like, "What do you mean?" And the vets came out laughing and was like, "Oh yeah, I named you the cat rescue," and he had this whole long name that was like my name plus cat rescue. And so yeah, it ended up being that they kind of worked with us, and we ended up getting all the cats there taken care of. But it was not planned. Again, it was just kind of just happened. So yeah. So
Having read your book, I know the animals work their way somewhat into the story for sure.
yes. Yes.
That's for sure. Are we going to see more and more of that as the series progresses? Can we expect to see more kind of unique creatures? There were some pretty unique ones in The Calling. Can we expect to see that moving forward?
Yeah, Digga is a very big part of the series. Okay. So Digga, Steve, so you know, is a cave digger, which is sort of like a cross between a wolverine and an American badger. So American badger markings, but much larger and like the size of a bear when they're full grown. They're pretty terrifying. But there's one that becomes orphaned and taken in by one of the star beings. And yeah, so Digga becomes very important. There's also, it's so hard without spoilers, but yeah, there's a lot of unusual animal things that happen. Yeah, there's a lot of, how do I want to explain it? Sort of where it gets sort of paranormal, but I based it on a lot of experiences and I've worked with some indigenous people, and it's there's some things that are based on not based on their beliefs. It came to me in the dreams, and but it does sort of have that feel. I think people might think that that's what it was based on, but it just came to me. Like, again, Rana just told me all this stuff. So, but yeah, there's a lot of stuff with animals in there that's why there's the eagle on the back of the chasm. Yeah. So.
I also, and you correct me if I'm wrong, just based on just, of course, my own reading. There's almost a big, like a found family almost theme in some ways in your book that I saw anyways, and I found the traditions of the star beings fascinating, frankly, and some of the what, without spoiling, like how they decided to move forward as a race and the things that they were doing to to preserve the race. But I did found that there was, because I think a lot of the characters came together, well, basically because of the two characters, but a lot of characters came together who otherwise would not have had anything to do with each other.
Right.
Almost like a found family kind of kind of thing. Like, was that something that you were trying to convey in the book, like the friendship bound family, kind of like disparate people coming together to have like a common goal, or do you know what I mean? Like,
again, I didn't plan any of it out. It just, like, that's the way the story came. But I do love stories where people that wouldn't necessarily come together have to work together to survive. That's one of my favorite tropes, and so so I guess it's not that surprising that that's what I end up writing. But yeah, that's definitely a big part of throughout the whole series. I think there's a lot of people that end up coming together and forming families and friendships that wouldn't necessarily ever have done it. Yeah, and there's some setups for some of that in the chasm that comes out that I think people were a little surprised, and yeah, so yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, I know like I did write it specifically with it's sushi. I do feel like he really was able
Yeah.
to find a family, and that does become kind of a bigger part of his arc
Yes.
is, his connection with the star beings and educator Garrick and all that. Because his family is not, or his
Yeah.
adopted family is just not worth much. So yeah. Um, but yeah, again, but I didn't really plan it out. It just kind of came out that way.
And I also see on your bio that you've taught wilderness appreciation classes. What are those like?
Um, well, that was a project. It was a short-lived project. The overall project is still going on, but my involvement was just for about a year. But it was there's a um, there's a nature school in Connecticut that does a lot of teaching people basic survival skills, life skills, and I worked with them for a while, working with young girls and getting girls to connect back with nature in ways that are um, just giving them a setting that is hmm, more more conducive to exploring, I guess, what it means for them to be um, feminine or connecting with nature. It just sometimes when you separate different groups of people, I hesitate to say genders. I don't want it to make it sound like a binary, but when you separate people into different smaller groups, sometimes they are able to explore things in different ways within that group that they couldn't otherwise. And so that's what we were focusing on. And it was really awesome. But I just was not able to keep doing that with the writing. And I also homeschool my kids. So I'm just doing like a lot of things. So I was not able to keep doing that, but it was great. And I definitely hope to do more with them at some point because it's a great organization.
Mhm.
So
Well, I know, as you mentioned, the book has. I mean, it's due to the dreams you've had, but I mean, you still had to write it. I mean, you're still the person that wrote it. Um, did you? One thing I really admired was your ability to tackle so many POVs and do
mm,
them effectively, right? Did you find that difficult at all in juggling the POVs and kind of tying things together, as the characters intersect and cross, and some don't come into each other's orbit till a bit later in the
yeah,
book.
I actually didn't. I know. I mean, I found it hard to limit it because everybody wanted to tell their story. And so originally I had 8 point of views instead of 5. And and it went right through until I got that publishing contract, and that was one of the things that they had recommended was that like Educator Garrick had his own point of view, and I love he's one of my favorite characters. And I loved hearing it from his point of view, but it was true that a lot of the scenes that he was in, Itsushi was also in. And, by switching Garrick's scene to Itsushi, it is young adult. So it does go from, the teacher to the student. It does give another, it also, by doing that, kind of strengthened Itsushi's voice, gave him more time to talk about his journey. Um, and like Balavati originally had a point of view, Rana's friend, which I felt bad cutting because I really did want more uh, women's voices in there, and I felt like, oh, but yeah, it did work better to give that to Kahali. So there were things that it was more limiting than doing the different ones because I felt like the way they came to me so clearly, it wasn't hard to write in their point of view. The only one that gave me trouble was Bleu. He was just a pain. I mean, he's one of the main characters, but he had so many secrets that he just did not want to share. And some of them are more obvious in the chasm, but yeah, there were things that he'd be like, yeah, this happens, and I would write it, he'd be like, not like that. I'd be like, well, how? And I would try to write it, and he would just tweak it over and over until I'm like, that's not like I couldn't figure it out until finally he told me some things about himself that I was like, oh, well, it was almost like a trust thing. So he was very hard to do. And Kalakanya, the star being that's crowned, that like sees timelines and stuff like that, she is very hard to write. She doesn't have a point of view, but she's very hard to write because she just knows so much, and she has a lot of secrets in a way. Not in the sense of we think of secrets, but things that she and I get into this a lot more in the chasm, where it's really hard because she knows so much, but she doesn't want to change things by telling people. So it's not, and also, she does have a personality. There are things that she would prefer to happen or not to happen. And that's, that's very hard for her to know what, to know what to say and what not to say. And so, I made a choice not to go into those details yet. At some point, I do think she will have a point of view, but it's hard to show her without actually writing her sometimes. But I also felt like it wasn't the right time yet to write her point of view. So you mostly see her through Rana or Bleu at this point. Yeah.
Okay. I was wondering, like, because if there's one thing about your book that, and this is, I mean, every book is unique, and I'm a big themes person. I compelling themes. If your prose is great and your characters are great and your themes are great, that usually I'm sold, right? Like you're already at 4-star territory. And of course, yours was a 5-star for me. It was beyond that. But one of the fascinating themes I found was the whole eugenics stuff in your book. So, without spoiling, can you tell us a bit about that aspect, like human engineering, and whether or not you think that's something where potentially where we're going as a race? Are we going towards that?
Yeah, that was not planned at all. That was, they did when they formed the Four Havens, they really were very careful about trying to include everyone. But they did draw the line at what they considered healthy versus unhealthy. And that's, a line that I have issues with, but there are things with that organization that are definitely messed up. But they did try to do, racially, ethnically, religiously. They did on some levels try to combine things in a just way, but not as just as it could have been. So are you talking about that part of it, or like how with the sickness it developed? I'm not sure which part
No,
you're.
I was talking specifically about that, the planning of it, and
Yeah.
the choices that were made in terms of what the traits were, and yeah. So
Yeah.
the illness part I more understand.
Yeah.
Not to say I don't understand the general injustice, but just in terms of having to retreat underground, having this many resources, feeling the need to protect
Yeah.
in some ways protect your civilization, right? So, but no, specifically about the choices and the planning and yeah, that part, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I hope we're not headed there. I really hope we're not headed there. Uh, it's there's sort of a um, bad luck or fate quality, I think, to that whole organization of SHAST, which stands for the Subterranean Human Advancement of Science and Technology. That just so Steve I don't want you to feel left out here. But yeah, so I feel like they really were trying to do the best they could in a few years. It's honestly, I think it's kind of amazing that they got all the nations of the world to work together. In this crisis, and that they did as much as they did, but they also had a lot of issues, which is why I kind of want to write that whole prequel about that whole mess and how that all went down. Um, but but yeah, I don't know that any of us in situations where you're making choices like that, I don't know that they're sometimes you just have to make awful choices, I think. And I think that they did the I'd like to think they did the best they could, although I don't, they could have done things differently, definitely. But I do think, given what they had to work with and the time constraints, and that they knew they could only save so many people, and that whatever, that it, I do think that they tried to do their best. But yeah, I definitely have issues with the way they did it. So it's, yeah.
Yeah, I found that part fascinating. I found that part fascinating. I was very curious to hear what you, as the author, found
Yeah.
about that element of the book, because yeah, that was really compelling to read.
Yeah, I really want to write the story of Itsushi's parents, his biological parents, because he's a frozen embryo from that time, Steve. Just but yeah, but yeah, I would really like to write their story.
I'm all there for that one. I definitely want to. I definitely sign up to read that one.
Yeah.
He was probably I would say my third favorite character. Maybe my favorite character, I'd say.
Who was your favorite and second favorite?
Yeah.
And that's where I'm a bit still a bit conflicted. And basically because and when you talk about the whole eugenics thing, I felt like there were some characters, and of course I was happy the book was amazing, but there's some characters I want to see more of. Like, I want to see a bit more about them. Blue, of course, was I pretty sure was my favorite character. By if you're gonna call me to task, I'm gonna say it's Blue, and then Rana, and then Rana.
Okay.
So but
Yep.
you know, um, but yeah, I think they were definitely my favorite characters. I found the whole I found the whole star being like really like fascinating, like really completely fascinating, and uh, things really took it to another level when they start as soon as they start to be introduced. That's when things really really like took off.
Yeah. Yeah, that was one of the hardest parts about writing. Sorry, about writing the book, was getting the timing of where to start it right, because the star beings are such an important part of the book, but I felt like people really needed to know the human side before we jumped up to the surface where the star beings were. And it was also hard because a lot of novels, you have someone that goes into the new world
Yeah.
and can experience it and ask questions, and this was just jumping from below in Northern Haven to up on the surface with the star beings, and there was no intro. You were just there. There was no one going up there. And so that was really hard to kind of show them in a way that made sense to people without, me explaining before they read it. So, because they're so different, their thought process is so different, I think. So,
But I mean, when you introduce beings like a book that starts off with humans essentially, and then humans, and then you introduce these powerful beings, that, but yet you managed to really make humanize them in a way, right? Really, really well. That was one of the strengths, I think, definitely of the book. That I think it really, for me, it made, it was all about what were the commonalities, right? Like, what are the commonalities? What's the common ground? How are these two very different races of beings? How are they going to coexist? How are they going to cooperate? How are they going to, and because at first you wonder if they will, right? If it's going to turn out horribly, but again, I think more of a case of, common enemies, can bring people together too. And I think that was something else I found in the book about common, and not just physical enemies, but common threats,
Mm-hmm.
common issues, right? Can
Yeah.
really, be put together. So yeah, like I said, extremely well done. I still books that are really well done. I still think about, and I still think about the calling, and that's a good thing. So that means that like you really made an impression
Oh,
on me.
thank you. That's
So yeah, it was great.
that's great. Thank you. That's every author's dream. So
And not just me, of course. I mean, you obviously have quite the following. How's it been for you in general in terms of the writing community and the connections you've made and
Mhm.
your audience, and like how has that all gone since you started writing? Did you start off like pretty well being on socials a lot prior to writing? Was that something you did after? Yeah, okay.
No, I always avoided social media. I much more rather go out in the woods and hang out with the deer than be on the computer. No, I really only got on because of Pitch Wars, and and then I found the writing community, and I just really liked. I made some great connections, and started thinking more about, I probably do need a platform if I am going to be publishing myself. And then I kind of expanded out to other platforms, but Twitter's definitely been my favorite. I think because it's so writing based, and I've been very generally pretty good about being able to block out all the political and the drama and just, ignore it, um, and really focus on writing and readers. And I love the fact that social media allows us to connect with our readers. That to me, you know, before that, I never would have thought to write to one of my favorite authors. I would have assumed I'd be bugging them, or they didn't care, or they got too many letters, or whatever. But I love that people can, you know, message me and be like, "Oh my gosh, what is Savas doing?" And it could just be like this great little interchange sort of thing. So,
Yeah, that's it.
What are some books that you've read recently that have stuck out for you?
I haven't read as much as I should. um, let's see. The I think hmm, my favorite sci-fi books that I've read this year have been uh, Estes. There's a
Mm.
book one and book two by S.C. Atwell, and it's actually um, met her on Twitter, and we joke that our books are kind of like polar opposites. Hers is an underground city in the desert, and in climate change that way, and so. But I absolutely love the characters and her book. Um, and I've also been interested in reading Don Ross's series, which is sort of Star Trek inspired, I'd say. And it has a lot of, there's a lot of questions about compassion and, you know, how much is okay without putting yourself or your company or your men in danger, kind of, if you're out in a situation, you're responsible for a team, and how do you find that balance, that I really enjoy in that series. And there's also a lot of like developmental stuff because they have kids and adults again interacting in that book, in ways sort of like a lot of books are just young adults, and the adults are all kind of gone, you know and it's almost like they're living in this separate world. And that was one of the things I had fun with writing in my book, is the adults are there, and I like the way Don Ross has the adults and the kids interact in the book. So those have been the ones I've been reading recently. So
Nice.
yeah.
I'm trying to keep it with PL. He reads too fast for me. So
Yeah, I've always been a really avid reader, So, but those sound like some great books. I think I have either one or both of those on my TBR. I'd have to check. The hardest part now is just getting to all getting to all things I really want to read. Right. It's
right.
Really become a challenge. Right. So between writing and my regular job and everything else, right? And, great things like this page doing, which I would trade for the world, but you got to read books, right? So, but the other thing too is that what I try my best to have read the books of most of the people that come on the show.
Mm-hmm.
I can't get to all of them, but I try to, and certainly it gives me an additional insight to the people that are because you want to get to know your guests and get to know things about them. It's important, and it's great when you have that bird's eye view from having read the writing. So that's it's a good thing. Right? So, but yeah. So question, Branwen, do you find the whole marketing promotional side of is it
I'm
harder for
laughing.
you? You're right. You're laughing because that's most people, except for the Ryan Cahills.
Maniacal laughter.
Yeah, it just I mean, and I want to hear from you in a second. And I also hear from Steve from the outside, from a reader's perspective and a blogger's perspective. We're talking about the indie world here specifically because we are everything. We are the bottle washer chief, the cook, the writer, sometimes the cover artist, sometimes the editor, and we still have to get our books out there and make people aware so that we can sell them. And so for Steve, as a blogger, as a YouTuber, I know a lot of what you read are recs, but also sometimes it's because the author did a really good job of marketing their book to catch your eye, right? But for the writers, Brandon, for you and I, I think, I want to hear what you have to say, but I know for me, that's the hardest part of the whole entrepreneurship. I'm blessed to have my wife. We're partners. She does a lot of the business stuff and she has a background in marketing. She does a lot of great
You're
things.
lucky.
So I'm extremely blessed, extremely lucky. Believe me, in every way. I know, unfortunately, I am. But even still, it's tough for both. I mean, we both work full time. It's not easy, right? And you can't, writing the books are one thing, but if you want to recoup, at least some of your costs and things like that, so you can potentially keep doing it, for those who aren't blessed, to be completely, financially okay, it's not a problem. Like most of us, and even if you are, even if it's not you dip into savings, it's fine. It's just, it's a labor of love. So you choose to spend some of your money on publishing books. Most of us would still like to see, those books are out, and then you can't do that unless you market properly. So, Branwen, how is it for you? How's it been? And then we'll hear from Steve about it.
I'm still looking for the magic wand of marketing. Yeah. I've gotten to the point where I've decided I'm just going to do the parts I enjoy, because I like to think that when we're passionate about something, it kind of shows, and that will hopefully get others more. It's more catching than just buy my book, so I do enjoy doing stuff like this, and I enjoy doing the written interviews. So a lot of blog stuff, I do those. And I distribute widely. I don't know how many I actually, it's not a great number that off of Amazon, but I would like to eventually, grow that. And then social media. But it's hard. It's hard constantly generating stuff that's not, what you're writing in addition, so yeah, I don't know.
What's your secret, PL? You have a pretty big following.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, but I don't know if I have a big. I think when it comes to marketing, I think when I first conceived of writing a book, I'm not the marketing background or finesse that my wife does, but I did realize ahead of time that, hey, you have to start marketing prior to the book coming out, or else by then it's almost not too late, but you know, you don't have the
kind of
momentum.
is, yeah.
Yeah, you don't have it met. Like no one knows. Oh, I just
Right.
hey guys, I'm coming on Twitter. It's my first day. I just published a book yesterday. So
Yeah.
hey, how's it going? Like, you know, that was very effective. But I wasn't as concerned with the marketing aspect per se. I was more concerned about the my ability to make connections and get exposure in general about me and what I represented, rather than okay, well, you know, the sales part, because I figured, you know, eventually that would come around. But I was more concerned about making those connections and having real, actual like friends and social relationships while I did all this. Because, like you said, Brent, I didn't want to just buy my book, buy my book, buy my book. I wanted to, you know, I want to learn about the writing community. I want to, have people that, you know, I could mentor, that they can mentor me, that we could learn from each other, that we could learn tips about. Okay, well, okay, I can't figure this out about Amazon. Well, how do I do this? How do I, how do I get into this space? Like I was more concerned about that. And then I, Deb and I, like we had some things already figured out in terms of kind of a general plan, but as an indie author, those plans change constantly because the hardest part is to figure out what direction to actually go in. Do you spend money on ads? Do you not spend any money on ads? Do you put your book on this website? Do you not? Do you try and work with this reviewer or not? Like what? Like you just don't, like there's no playbook. And I think because of the indie market, especially, it's so it's amazing. It's so dynamic and it changes quickly, but it's also this big vast thing that like you don't even know where to I take a lot of time now to, and I know nothing. I'm a novice. I only have 2 books that I'm still learning myself, but I take a lot of time to try and mentor people who are like starting off, especially people who they wrote a book, but that's it. They've never been on social media. They don't know what to do. So, trying to direct them towards things like blog tours and, how to get reviews and the importance of Goodreads and Amazon and, doing podcasts. Like I try and, steer them in that direction. And a lot of it too, though, I think you said, Brandon, you have to do what you're comfortable with too. Not everybody's comfortable with doing a blog tour or doing something like this. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that, right? You can still be effective. There's some really top selling authors that you hardly ever see on social media. And they're selling, they're outselling, all of us combined by thousands and thousands of books. But there's some that's what they do too, and they're very successful and they use them. And is there a right way? No, it just whatever works for you and whatever, whatever your tolerance level is for certain things, and also what your aspirations are in terms of your sales goals. Like for some people, they just want to earn out. And if they make more, that's nice. For some people, earning out isn't really a factor. They just want to write their books, tell their stories, and hopefully someone likes it. For some people, it's all the sales are really a motivator and a driver, right? But that's okay. It's up to the individual, right? And as indies, we have the luxury that we can still keep writing whether we have sales or not, as long as financially we can put out a book. It doesn't matter if we earn it. It isn't. But if you're traditionally published, it's a whole different model, right? So I don't know if I'm necessarily good at marketing. What I know is that now I have somewhat more exposure than I had when I first started, right? Where, you come on social media, it's like, hey, and you have no followers on any platform and you're just shouting at the void. And I talk about this a lot, is that is the scariest moment, I think, in terms of, well, how am I good? Like, who's gonna know that I existed? But eventually bit by bit, just right, and you make connections, you make genuine friends, and you learn things, and you get strategies, and you go in different directions, and then eventually, you find your ways. So, but I think a lot of it, to be honest with you, is luck and a lot of guesswork, right? Because again, there's no roadmap, especially in indie publishing. I think the way the traditional publishing has much more of a, yes, they change and they evolve, but we have much less of a roadmap as indie authors.
I think the genre you write in makes a huge difference too. You read these articles about advice and it might only work for fantasy or just romance or just, I feel like sci-fi is kind of the illegitimate child of the genre. Like we don't usually get talked about much. But yeah, there's there's a lot of I think a lot of the advice works best if it's from people in your genre. Is another thing that I've noticed. And the age category, if you're considering that a genre or not, that also makes a huge difference. Um, yeah.
That's an excellent point. Yeah, sci-fi. I mean, I do love sci-fi. I don't read as much as fantasy, but predominantly read sci-fi, fantasy, and horror. Um, Now with things like the self-published science fiction blog off, Branwen, I'm not sure if you're ever going to throw your book in there.
I
For
tried. I think I was over the deadline or the timeline. Wasn't there a
Oh, okay,
timeline? Yeah, I
yeah,
think I
yeah.
didn't. Yeah, I didn't have I wasn't paying enough attention. I had too many other things going on.
Oh, yeah,
But
and
yeah,
and it's going to be there, so you never know in the
yeah,
future. You throw it back in, right?
mhm,
So, but yeah,
yeah,
what I'm saying is with things like that now, I think the things contests like that, like SFPO for fantasy, SPSFC, I call it Spacebo is the acronym. Not the acronym. The Spacebo is the nickname. Yeah,
mhm,
SPSC, self published science fiction fantasy contest. Um, with things like that, it's really connecting the community to you go there and all these amazing self-published science fiction books,
yeah,
and it can lead you to the people and connect you to the people because invariably the people know other sci-fi writers and you
mhm,
get this whole. So I think now it's more about if you might find that one area, that one app, that one platform, that one contest, that one, and once you get there,
mhm,
typically you can find your tribe, so to speak, and your community, and then usually things tend to take off from there, right? You know, sorry, I think
yeah,
it's a
Oh, no, it's okay. Austin says even Brandon Sanderson has been using YouTube to expand his audience. A lot of current authors have been focusing on reading I became a fan of as a person first or get interested that way.
mhm,
yeah, absolutely. Steve is the future. Steve and his YouTube colleagues, they're the future, man. It's where I said this a couple times, and Brandon, I'm not sure how you're feeling about this, but I have found that in the last, especially last year, and as I got to know more booktubers, and appear on Steve's channel or on Taylor's channel, myself as a guest co-host, and meet a lot of booktubers, get to know their content, especially this science fiction fantasy stuff, and just be amazed at how insightful they are and how they really have good recommendations and stuff. Like it started to really guide my reading choices, and I think
Mhm.
that is becoming more and more of a thing where booktubers are starting to, when people tune into their favorite, they start today, okay, my favorite booktubers, what are they reading, what's going on, what are they talking
yeah,
about, and add that to my TBR. And that is something that I think is a thing now. Whereas 10 years ago, like, how did I consume books 10 years ago? I walked into my local Canada's the big Chapters Indigo. That's the major book distributor. I browsed and I found books that like that was how I
yeah,
picked books, right? But now it's totally different, right?
yeah,
Especially since COVID and physical bookstores closing down, more things being
yeah,
online. Like, yeah, I now it's when I want to know something, one of the first things I do most days is tune into Steve's channel. Then I tune into Taylor's and Daniel Greens and APs and Philip Chase's and see what they're and all the booktubers, Angie Bookaholic and all these people that I didn't even know 2 years ago, and now
yeah.
that's when I want to, okay, what am I going to read next? Well, what are they reading? Oh, there
Uh-oh.
goes that alarm again. You gotta excuse me here. I'm sorry.
Hope there's no fire.
Um, it was looks like maybe it was reset.
Uh,
Okay. I don't know. It's some kind of malfunction, I think, in this building. It's hardwired, those hardwired alarms, and
Mm.
it
mm,
I don't know. One time we were actually away. About 4 hours away visiting. It was for my eldest son and daughter-in-law, their baby shower. And we got a call that, oh, your alarm's going off, and
oh,
I had to. Luckily, the fire department has a key, so they had to come inside, and just we went face to process. We had to drive back 4 hours. We didn't plan to. Oh, it's going off
Uh-oh.
again. Okay, you gotta excuse me. I will.
Sure. I hope there's not really a fire.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's
So you have done some yoga class, or been a yoga teacher. How did that come about?
Um, that was more, I never actually wanted to teach. I was more interested in deepening my own practice. And so I took took a lot of I did the teacher training, and I did end up teaching, but I wanted to understand my own practice with yoga and deepen the meditation and the how I did it myself. Do you know anything? Have you done yoga, or do you?
I've tried it. It's a lot harder than it looks.
It is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 It's you wouldn't think you'd be so tired after that, but it's a lot. It's a great workout for you, really, and balance, and your
Yeah.
to help clear your mind. And I wondered what the connection is for you personally between something like yoga and being out in the wilderness and having that peace and quiet. Is there a connection there that you can that you draw from your own personal experience?
Yeah. I think. Hello. um,
Sorry, sorry.
I think for me it's kind of about all connecting back to myself and whatever I consider, you know, divine or in charge of the universe. I don't. I'm not. I don't know. I don't like to define things. I like to kind of leave them open. Um, but I do find that when I get back into my center, my heart space, then everything in life just seems to kind of fall back into place if I can get back there. Um, and not just for me, but then I'm able to better be there, like for my kids and my
Mhm.
friends and clients and stuff. So for me, yoga and nature does that as far as getting myself balanced. But I also feel like there's that outward connection as well. So it's kind of an inward connection, but also an outward connection, because once we're connected with ourselves, then we can kind of connect better with others and with the trees and the animals out there and stuff like that. Um, which is kind of, now that I think about it, kind of the way I describe the whole calling ceremony in the calling, when they do kind of connect, the star beings connect with themselves, and then they will connect out with whoever they're trying to call. So yeah.
And we want to respect your time, but I do have one more question for you. I'd like to
Mhm.
try and ask all of our guests. I think we learn a lot by knowing what someone's first job was. So, what was your first job, and what did you take away from that that's stayed with you through the years?
Oh geez, I don't even know what my first one was. um hmm, Probably a paper route. um and Interestingly enough, I'd say the first thing I learned was balance, because there were so many papers that I got two bags and I put one over on this shoulder and one over on that shoulder, because there were yeah, and I learned that I really liked jobs that included like physical activity. It was fun. I enjoyed walking around. I was fine with the weather being bad, but I did not like having to go ask people for money, which is very, very much like the marketing seems like. I
Yeah.
did not like that part, but I did really enjoy the walking around and giving them something that they wanted. So yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So
Just like a fun first job. I never had that one, but yeah, it sounds like a
yeah.
fun one.
I don't think they even. I think they just have adults do it now at this
Mhm.
point. At least around here, they just have adults do it. They drive around in cars. It's a totally different experience, but it was a fun first job.
Yeah, they just throw the
No, we
paper.
had to put it we had to put it on the it was in a bag with like a little hole, and you had to actually put it on the doorknob. We could not chuck things, but but yeah, it was still fun. Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you for coming by and chatting with us today. And for
Yeah.
anyone who wants to get in touch with you or learn more about your work, where's the best place to find you?
Probably Twitter. Yeah. And I'm just at my name, so it's at Branwen OShea. And yeah. Yep.
Awesome.
I mean, I'm also on Facebook and Instagram, sort of, but yeah. But Twitter's definitely where I'm most interactive. So
Awesome. And I'll have all those. I think the links are already down below, but I'll make sure they're down below so people can get in touch with you. And
great.
PL was a, yeah,
Thank you so much. This has been really fun.
yeah. See, we're pretty easy going. We're
Yeah.
pretty easy. Yeah.
Yeah.
And PL, where's the best place for people to find you?
Oh, for sure, Twitter. It's where I kind of roam. I like Ben when I am on Instagram and Facebook, and I try to interact there what I can. But for the most part, Twitter is my preferred social media platform. You can also read my reviews on Goodreads, and especially through Before We Go blog, led by the wonderful Beth Pavler. Steve and I are both bloggers there. So www.beforewegoblog.com. And I also want to mention, because Branwen is here, so I've mentioned this before in previous episodes on my website, I do a blog author interview feature called Six Elemental Interviews, named after the six elemental goddesses in my current series. And Branwen honored me with an interview recently, so that'll be coming out in the future. So I do try to feature creatives two each month that I do written interviews with. Mostly on Twitter, and DM me. You want to talk about writing? You have questions about Dragon Kingdom Saga? You want to know about books, or just connect? Yep, DMs are open, and I think a pretty approachable guy, and just say hi.
You
Yep.
can't fool me, PL. I know better. But I want to thanks again for coming by to chat with us today, and of course everyone in the chat who submitted questions and comments. We really appreciate it. It's always fun having that interaction, that feedback. So thanks for taking time out of your day with us.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks again. We'll talk to everybody soon.
Okay. Bye.